Hello and welcome on Beautiful People. Today my guest is a musician. Please welcome sitar player and composer Anoushka Shankar, who has a new album out, Traveller, and is traveling across India these days, isn't it, with that album performing live. Anoushka, lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you, good to be here.
You're back performing live, I think, in India after about two and a half years.
2 years.
Last time you were here was with Tal, isn't it? Was that the
no,
last
that was
one?
years ago. I did a series of classical concerts with my father in 2010 spring, so that was, yeah, almost 2 years ago.
So 2 years ago, how does it feel to be back performing
Oh, it's so
here?
lovely. It's so lovely to be back, especially with this album that's, you know, a crossover between Indian music and flamenco, and we've been presenting it in Europe for a few months now. So it feels so important to then come and do the parallel and present it here in India, and so I'm really excited to be back.
I remember meeting you previously when you did Rise. That was your first album, I think, as composer.
As a composer, yeah.
Yeah. So when you did Rise, I remember we speaking about the fact that there was one track there, I think, called Voice of the Moon, and you said that there are some tracks which are great to perform live. You know, because they offer you great energy and sort of excitement among the musicians who are performing at that moment. So on this album, Traveller, would I be right in saying that this Buleria con Ricardo must be the track that's really exciting to perform live?
Yes, it's definitely one of the highlights that people seem to really respond to, and is a lot of fun for us because it's a very driven, very rhythmic track. But also I kind of have taken all of the tracks from this album that we perform live and have really reworked them a bit so that we're not reproducing them exactly as on the record. And so they do all have a really interesting live energy, and the band that I'm with are so particularly brilliant that they bring that energy to every piece, really.
Flamenco music is the music of the gypsies, isn't it?
Of Spain, yes.
Of Spain,
yes.
And of the gypsies, is there a gypsy association?
There
to
absolutely
flamenco?
is. The gypsy community in Spain is largely what dominates the flamenco tradition, and so even today, you know, it is the music of the gypsies, but you will have non-gypsy musicians. However, really the strong areas that flamenco music develop are, for example, Seville, Madrid, Barcelona, where the gypsy communities are strong, and it is really their music. And in fact, that gypsy connection is one that traces all the way back to India, from the nomadic peoples from Rajasthan and beyond that travelled across Central Asia, the Middle East, and landed up in Spain. And so that was what I was really interested in retracing on this album.
In fact, Traveller, which is the title track, would I be right if I interpret it as saying that, you know, it has a very folk Indian sound to it?
Absolutely.
Less Spanish flamenco, or how does it work? Explain it to the layperson.
Well, I didn't. That's an interesting point you brought up, because what I didn't want to do was go and just make a flamenco album, because I'm an Indian musician, I'm a sitar player. There are a million flamenco musicians who could make a better flamenco album than I would make. So what I was interested in making was a collaboration between Indian music and flamenco, and to allow these two styles to interact with each other in different ways, to create new sounds. So some of the pieces on the album are ones in which I travel completely over to the flamenco side and have, you know, developed techniques on the sitar to match flamenco guitar and so on.
So Inside Me would be, you know, the first track would that be?
Yeah, it's definitely more in the flamenco vein. Or Kanya, in fact, is something that's very much in a famous old flamenco style. And then in the other pieces, it's about coming in the other direction and having, for example, Spanish musicians or rhythms, but presenting more of an Indian piece. And then the third is, of course, when the two styles combine and end up in a place that's not quite one or the other. And that's very interesting as well.
And which track do you think it best, brings that out?
I would say Boy Meets Girl is a very interesting one. It's deceptively simple in the sense that it's just a duet between sitar and guitar, which is played by a great master, Pepe Abituela. But it was actually a very complex track to create, because we were trying to allow two simultaneous forms to exist at the same time, one being the presentation of an Indian raga and one being a form called the granaína from flamenco. And we had to work quite hard to find a way to make that work, but as it stands, if you were just listening, it just sounds like a very simple, beautiful melody, but actually it's two very old styles that are completely separate, being able to coexist.
you.